pleasant morning to one and all present here virtually. It's a great privilege in welcoming you all to the second day of two-day international conference. It's my pleasure to walk you through the conference, introduce you to the speakers and participants who have come from various parts of the world to share their knowledge and enhance our mental horizon. We have experts from across the field who will be staying with us throughout today's conference, sharing their thoughts, knowledge, and opinions with the rest of us. Our hearty welcome to our respected professors and aspiring student participants who joined us to explore. Last but not the least, once again, I welcome you all to have a successful, safe, and fruitful conference. Now, I request Professor Arpita, Department of English, to introduce a great speaker of plenary session. I welcome you, ma'am.
I wish a cheerful morning to one and all gathered here. It's my privilege to welcome our resourceful guest speaker of the day, Mr. Ahmed Hossain, sir, Assistant Professor, Department of English, IBAIS University, Bangladesh. Sir has completed his BA Honours and MA in English Literature from the People's University of Bangladesh. He also completed MPhil research degree with stipend in English Literature from Jahangirnagar University. Now he is doing PhD in English Literature and Comparative Studies with stipend at Jahangirnagar University. He has served as an assistant professor. He is now teaching English at IBAIS University, Uttara, and NM Nursing College, Savar. He served as a research associate at Uttara University as a lecturer in English at America, Bangladesh University. BGIFT Institute of Science and Technology, Ghazipur. Tutor at Bangladesh Open University and SM Mosmal Haq Technical School and Business Management College, Dakshin Khan, Uttara, Dhaka. He has also a wide range of research experience. He authored a book on Ibsen studies from Lambert Publications, Germany. He has written 80 articles and published 70 articles in international peer-reviewed and high-impact factor journals, including Scopus. He is a reviewer and editor of more than 200 international scholarly journals around the world. He is also serving as an expert of international research associations. He has presented 40 papers in the international conferences in Bangladesh, UK, South Korea, Turkey, Jamaica, USA, Macedonia, and India. Sir has been the member of many international associations. He is an active member of Modern Language Association of America, TESOL International Association, Ibsen Society of America, British Shakespeare Association, Asian Council of Science Editors, the American Society for Theatre Research, the European Shakespeare Research Association, Australian Association for Research in Education, the European Association of Science Editors, International Literary Association, Association for the Study of Literature and Environment, Modern Humanities Research Association, Association for Literary Urban Studies, Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society, Global Research and Development Services, International Society of Development and Sustainability, International Society of Managing and Technical Editors, the John Donne Society of America, Milton Society of America, the Doris Lessing Society, the George Herbert Society, the William Morris Society of America, Association for Theatre and Higher Education, the International Research Foundation for English Language Education, Hereditary Genetics, OMICS, Publishing Group, American Indigenous Research Association, Architectural Humanities Research Association, and many more. We are honored to have you here, sir.
Thank you. But thank you very much for your discussion about me. Can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
You're all right.
But where I find share screen, is there any option of share screen? But I don't see any share screen. Screen share. There is
screen is not shared yet, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Yes,
okay, thank you. I would like to thank today's organizing committee for their invitation. and the international conference themes on Commonwealth literature, comprehensive and critical perspectives, and but I would like to thank all of you, organizing committee, uh, uh, because actually I am very sorry to say that I did not respond or my information to the conference committee. Actually, I have to remain busy for research purpose and academic purpose. That's why it has made me problem to send my information in time. So I'm sorry for that. Uh, Now I would like to present my plenary speech on subalternity, borders, and borderlands in South Asian literature in English. And at first, I would like to sort out what I will present in today's conference. First one, subalternity. Uh, Brief overview. Next, subalternity, identity, characteristics, important, subaltern critics and scholars, subaltern in South Asian literature in English, and borders, identity, classification of borders, and borderlands, identity, India, Bangladesh, borderlands, and borderlands conflicts in South Asian literature in English. This is the outline of my uh, presentation. And now I would like to let you know the sort of overview of the entire presentations. The purpose of my speech is to decipher the postmodern development of subaltern studies with a view to finding out the past and present side of the subalternity, so that today's students, teachers, scholars, researchers, critics of English literature can apply the theories and the approaches of the subaltern studies while they are devoted to investigating literary research to find out the inner meaning of subaltern writings creatively, creatively and critically. Uh, Literary genres can be interpreted in the light of subaltern studies that reflect social environments. To investigate literature with reference to the themes of subaltern studies, teachers, students, scholars, and critics should be devoted to going into the deeper meanings of the literary text. For this purpose, teachers, students, scholars, and critics need to participate in the symposium, table talks, mini talks, workshops, poster presentations, and above all, conference nationally and internationally. Next, what is a subaltern? And in post-colonial theory, the term subaltern describes the lower class, the lower social classes, and the other social groups displaced to the margins of a society. In an imperial colony, a subaltern is a native man or woman without human agency as defined by his or her social position. The working class is oppressed. The term subaltern produces subordinate. It means a lower ranking, even an inferior individual in the society or in the community. In this concern, I would like to agree with Ranojit Guha, who is a historian of the Indian subcontinent, who has been vastly influential in the subaltern studies groups and was the editor of several of the group's early anthologies. Subaltern Studies group is a group of South Asian scholars interested in the post-colonial and post-imperial society. The term subaltern studies is sometimes applied more broadly to others who share many of their views and opinions, and they are considered to be exemplary of post-colonial studies and as one of the most influential movements in the field of post-colonial literature. And their anti-essential approach is a history focusing on what happens among the masses at the base levels of society rather than among the elites. Historians who use these terms make it from Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist and communist who was imprisoned for a long time by Mussolini's police from 1926 until his death. At the age of 46, in a prison, he wrote notebooks on politics and history and philosophy. Next, characteristics of subaltern approach. The word subaltern, as given in the Oxford Dictionary, stands for the general attributes of the subordination, which is expressed in terms of a caste, class, age, gender, office, or any other way. It includes the characteristics of defiance and submission. Historically, subaltern is a word used by the British Army to denote a subordinate officer, and subaltern studies is coined by Indian scholars and critics to describe a variety of approaches to the situation of South Asia, in particular in the colonial and post-colonial era. Importance of subaltern. Subaltern studies analyze the binary relationship of the subaltern and ruling classes. Thus, studies the interplay of a dominance and subordination in colonial students, most notably India, though the though the methods of the movements have been applied to other nations, space and historical movements. Even the Indian Home Ministry fear the revelations. Indian studies of Indian rebels seek to uh, recuperate insurgent mentalities. Subaltern crisis, one of the group's early contributors, Sumit Sarkar, and, and titles one of which is a decline of the subaltern in subaltern studies, criticizing the turn to Foucauldian studies of a power knowledge studies. He writes that the socialist inspirations behind the early volumes leads to a greater impact in India, while the later volumes focus on Western discourse, revealing the subaltern colonizers' divides and their raging the prominence mainly in the Western academia. Even Gayatri Chakraborty Spiva, one of the most prominent names associated with the movement, has called herself a critic of metropolitan post-colonialism. Criticism, Indian sociologist Vivek Sivar has criticized the premise of the subaltern studies for its obfuscations of class struggles and class formations in its analysis, and accuses it of excising the class exploitations from the history of the operation of the subaltern. His critics explains in the book Post-Colonial Theory and the Spectre of the Capital is focused on the works of two Italian scholars, Ranajit Guha and Dipesh Chakraborty. According to Sivar, subaltern scholars tend to reference the Orient as a place where cultural differences negates analysis based on Western experiences. According to Ranajit Guha, subaltern studies intervenes in historical schools of thoughts that cannot represent the history of nationalisms in India without celebrating the roles the elite being played in bringing the larger nation into the discourse. This existing version of history, Guha argues, discounted subaltern contributions, and so the subaltern studies groups aims to rectify the elitist bias in the field dominated by the elitisms, colonialist elitisms and bourgeois nationalist elitisms. In Gramsci and Peasant Subalternity in India, Gramsci's use of the term subaltern invites us to appreciate the common properties of subordinate groups as a whole, the shared facts of their subordinations, their intrinsic weakness, their limited strengths, the special revolutionary characters of the industrial proletariat, as envisaged by the Marx and Hegel's of the Communist Manifesto is correspondingly played down. Gramsci does not dispute that the proletariat has certain advantages of the organizations and consciousness, as has been seen. She expects it to establish its hegemony over other subordinate classes, but it has many of the negative attributes of the peasantry, passivity, disunity, spontaneity, etc. Subalternity in South Asian literature in English, Ranajit Guha's elementary aspects of the peasants' insurgency in colonial India is considered one of the inaugural works of the subaltern studies in peasantry insurgency. Guha marks not only the bias of the historiobiography and archive of the colonial India's government's documents, but also the bias of the folklore, which has traditionally been perceived and touted by the nationalist groups as authentic and untainted by the colonizer Britain. Thus, for Guha and colonial historiography of the peasants in India is tainted by a bourgeois lens, either through the colonial agenda or through the national agenda. Guha's intervention is to trace the mounting everyday actions that are silenced in favor of their larger event. In this intervention, he moved to dispel the nation that Indians seek to colonial subjects are powerless during the colonial rule, especially from 1783 to 19, and the instead seek to describe the peasant's point of view, the complex relationship of subordination, dominance, and subsequent rebellion. Arundhati writes, the Ministry of Utmost Happiness presents a controversial discussions among critics and scholars. This novel is regarded as a camouflage of contemporary social political problems that are relevant to subaltern studies in global South context. The novel is about every day and everything happening in rapidly changing the Indian subcontinent, particularly about displaced and the marginalized peoples or the communities through the protagonist Anjum, that is a Hijra transgender issue has been reflected. Gender discriminations, caste inequality, capitalism, and socio-political concerns have been represented very faithfully. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness is an outburst of Arundhati Rai's treatment of the new subaltern, which are victims of social and political crisis. Onjum has been portrayed as a subaltern. The central character of the novel is a Hijra, and in terms of the rights, they are most marginalized people in the society, particularly India and Bangladesh. Subaltern in Indian Literature Next, in terms of transgender, socio-political deprivations, patriarchy, colonialisms, capitalisms, and human psychological conflicts combined to erase them as subaltern. Nemo, a transgender residing at Kausbach, tells Onjum, do you know why God made Hijra? It was an experiment, a living creature that is incapable of happiness for us, the prize rights and the school admissions, husbands beating, wives cheating, Hindu-Muslim riots, Indo-Pakistan war, all inside us. The riot is inside us. The war is inside us. Indo-Pakistan is inside us. It will never settle down. These transgender people are subaltern, have no history, but they are always there in the history. Though Hijra are denied of their identity, they are not out of the influence of the global chain. And this novel presents unbearable conditions of the subaltern. Characters are portrayed as subaltern in terms of gender, caste, and class, etc. Onjum, the transgender protagonist, is the victim of social political deprivation, sales to build a paradise of her own. Roy's treatment of the vulnerability of the subaltern group in globalized city and capitalist society as a new dimension of Indian literature in English. Indeed, Gulok Raj Ananda's novel Untouchable. This is one of the most famous novel in the Indian subcontinent. Mulok Raj is one of the novelists of subaltern studies in Indian literature and in English, and Anand is influenced by Maxim Gorky's captures that once were men. While he writes his first novel Untouchable, which is about a day's life of an 18 years old Latin cleaner, Bakha, in the Punjab town of Bulandshahr, Ananda borrows the theme from James Joyce's Ulysses and Aristotle's concepts of the three unities like time, place, and action. His novel resembles the thematic of Odia novel Harijans by the Jnanpith awardee Gopinath Mohantri, which is also about the lives of the Latin cleaners. Bakha's friends say they think we are dirt because we clean their dirt. This ancient Indian habit of associating work with the caste and class structure is a hideous nightmare unknown to the West. This is indeed a pollution complex. A sweeper has to announce, pause, sweeper coming to avoid contact with caste Hindu. Bakha's brushing with a high caste Hindu on the city road, his secret entry into temple premises, and his collection of the breakthrough out by the mistress of a house from the gutter are three events in which Bakha had to digest the pangs of the humiliation. He boiled his wrath, he shivered, his brought implicit faith was fell with hostility, but he could not do anything. He hung his head and walked with a dropping chest. The protest boils down to silence and impotent wrath. Three characters appear in the novel, each with a solution to the stigma of untouchability. The missionary encourages conversion to Christianity, which regard every day as sons of God. However, the novel Untouchable has been translated into 20 languages of the world. It is an impassionate plea for social justice, equality. It shows the evil effects of untouchability and criticizes social, psychological, moral, philosophical, historical aspects of human life. This novel not only focuses on the pathetic, unbearable conditions of the untouchables, but also penetrates deep into the psychological dualities of conditions. In this regard, we can mention E.M. Forrester's opinion regarding sweeper. The sweeper is oath of then a slave, for the slave many change his master and his duty, and may even become free. But the sweeper is bound to his master forever, born into a state from which he can't escape, and where he is excluded from social intercourse and the consolation of his religion. Unclean himself, he pollutes others when he touches them. Thus, Ananda's novel Untouchable has projected this subaltern in the light of Dalit literature. Now, borders. Identity. Border means a boundary, especially of a country or state, the outer edge of something, the border of the woods, and decorative stripes on or near the edge of something. We live in a very borderland world. The daily news is filled with the controversies concerning the political, cultural, and economic borders that enclose the Earth's surface. Borders are central features in current international disputes relating to security, migration, trade, and natural resources. They also factor potentially into local debates over land use or property rights. Countries protect their borders for several reasons. One is to keep out invaders. This is especially the true in areas where two or more countries uh, have fought over the same land for many years. Palestine and Israel, for example, have disputed the territory since 1967. Borders are established through agreements between political or social entities that control those areas. The creation of these agreements is called boundary delimita- delimitations. Some borders, such as most states' internal administrative borders, interstate borders within the Schengen area, which are open and completely unguarded. The governments of a region can create and apply laws within its border. Borders change. Sometimes the peoples in one area take over another area. Sometimes land is traded or social peacefully. Borders are political and geographic boundaries of political and entities or legal jurisdictions, such as governments, sovereign states, federated states, and other substantial entities. Borders may foster the setting up of the buffer zones. Classification of borders. There are several types of borders: political borders, natural borders, landscape borders, geometric borders, and also the political borders. Political borders are imposed on the world through human agency. All the political borders may flow a river or a mountain range, such as features doesn't automatically define the political borders, even though it may be a major physical barrier to crossing. Political borders are often classified by whether or not they flow conspicuous uh, conspicuous physical features on Earth. Natural borders are geographical features that represent natural obstacles to communication and transports. Existing political borders are often a formalization of such historical natural obstacles or barriers. Landscape border is a mixture of political and natural borders. Landscape borders is not demarcated by fences and walls, but instead landscape features such as forest, mountains, and water bodies. It is different from natural border in the sense that the border landscape is not natural but human engineered. Such as landscape naturally differs from the borderlands natural geography, and its building requires tremendous human labor and financial investment. Geometric borders. Geometric borders are formally straight lines, such as lines of latitudes or longitudes, regardless of the physical and cultural features of the area. Such political boundaries are often found among the states that develop out of colonial holdings, such as North America, Africa, and Middle East. Frontier. Frontier is a border that is often ended to one side, identifying and expanding borderland to one side. These types of border has been identified as particular states of mind or for human activity. Maritime borders. A maritime border is a division and closing an area in the ocean where a nation has exclusive rights over the minerals and biological resources encompassing maritime features, limits, and zones. Maritime borders represent the jurisdictional borders of maritime nations and are recognized by the United Nations Conventions on the Laws of the Sea. Airspace borders. Airspace is the atmosphere located within a country controls international and maritime borders. All the sovereign countries hold the rights to regulate and protect airspace under the international law of all sovereignty. Within international agreements, a country can assume the responsibility of protecting or controlling the atmosphere of our international airspace, such as Pacific Ocean. Airspace regulations are set by nations and local governments within an airspace. Regulations of airspace differ by country and location. Border conflicts. Border conflicts occur because we do not know or we do not like where the line is. Disputes that cross borders are more complex. They are like to involve other bordering areas between two countries, otherwise not in dispute. Border conflicts refer to disputes about the divisions of land or water borders among two or more independent countries. Boundary disputes may evolve from historical or cultural claims or may be brought on by competitions for resource exploitations. Border conflicts are often related to the possessions of natural uh, resources such as rivers, fertiles, farmlands, mineral petroleums. Border there are several border conflicts are currently seen among some countries in the world. These include India, China border conflict, Palestine, Israel, North Korea, South Korea border conflicts, Kashmir, India border conflicts, China, Tibet, Georgia border conflicts, America, Mexico border conflicts, and Russia, Ukraine border conflicts, which have met war right now. What is happening in that countries? Now, there are some steps in this international peace and security, like United Nations Security Council shall first of all may take steps to solution these kinds of negotiations, inquiry, meditations, conciliations, arbitration, judicial settlement, response to regional agency or arrangement or other peaceful means of their own. This is the major political crisis that are happening in many countries of the world, border conflicts. What is borderlands? Next, the borderland or borderlands are the geographical space or zones around the territorial border. Borderlands define land located on or near a border and indeterminate area situations or the conditions the border between sleeping and waking. The border represents the limits of the capitalism systems. Paradigms and the military operations and gender violence so familiar to rural Myanmar is in conflict zones is now affecting the urban middle and working class groups that are long sheltered from the country's borderland conflicts. India Bangladesh borderland. A borderland is a vague or undetermined place created by the emotional uh, residue of an unnatural boundary. It is an constant state of the transitions with the prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. The terms borderlands addresses the regions that surround international borders. These are the place where power relations become particularly evident, where different cultures either mix or clash, creating a very specific political, spatial, cultural, economic, and social situation. Most geographical sites on borderlands aims to create a description of what may be called everyday border life, daily practices, economic activities, and cultural connections of people that live in borderlands that cross the borders of nations. Previously, the border was rather fluid and there existed few distinctions between India and Bangladesh. In those days, there was a rule where one could exchange lands in these two countries. So Hindu in Bangladesh and could trade his piece of land with a Muslim in India. They had many relatives here because there was no fence. People would keep visiting until recently people in the area did not have phones or internet connections. How did they remain in touch with their families across the border? The answer presented itself in the form of the Milan Mela. Next, a majority of the girls in about uh, 50,000 Bangladeshi girls are reportedly trafficked into India every day. Most are told they will find a better job. Some get kidnapped. Few knowing cross the border. A handful are rescued and sent to shelter homes till their repatriation, which can take around 4 years, and especially when their families refuse to identify them in order to protect familial trustees. So, border conflicts in how has these kinds of conflicts have been impacted in literature. In the novel Train to Pakistan, Pushpanto Singh presents the bizarre story of the partition of India and Pakistan. The events are deemed as one of the blackest chapters of human history. Khushwant Singh wants to explore the brutal and hypocritical image of man. Uh, Partition is the age of darkness everywhere in India, Pakistan. Millions of refugee homes are evicted and displaced forcibly and illegally. Partition is a traumatic experience in the postmodern times around the world. It brings to south a long and communal shared history and cultural heritage. The Khushwant Singh's portrayal of partition and communal rights are faithfully presented in the novel Trying to Pakistan. Amitabh Ghosh has focused on the political interferences in contemporary world in relation to his works, The Shadow Lines. The novel represents Ghosh's treatment of direct confrontation with nationalisms and national identity, and it is simultaneously about his character's personal identity. It represents the consequences of the partitions and mainly concerned with the partition on the Bengal border. There is the character named Thama, the grandmother of the unnamed narrator, through whom the issue of the Bengal partition and the whole idea of nationalisms and nationhood have been discussed. The characters and stories are rooted in the solid soil of the reality of human life. The shadowlines can be read as a destabilizing fixed binary logic imposed on nations of otherness, identity, history, memory in the constructions of nationalist boundaries. Thus, Guha represents national identity in a way which forces us to acknowledge the ambivalence of boundaries as even as we accept that partition is necessary. The Shadowlines is the particular novel explained in these books that really questions the concept of border, questions where very seriously whether the shadow lines that we inscribe to separate peoples into different nations has any validity or whether it is an abstract illusion. It is Ghosh's uh, con- uh, contentions in this novel that borders themselves are fictive and elusive. They defeat or negate the very reason behind their ostensible existence. The partition is a vivid manifestation of the claims, and the post-colonial nations are founded in a bloody insurverance of the uh, unbiblical code, and that fortified border between nation states with irrational and remorseless violence. This discourse of nationalism affects to make sense of the absurd loss of lives and occurs the novel that has made the reader to discover that the world is not a simple place that can see the atlas, but there are many inexorable facts hidden in that solid line as it leads to political aggressions and violent bloodshed. The boundaries between nations are like shadow lines of hatred and hostility out of national sentiments. The novel list shows how ordinary people try their best to seek mutual sympathy among various ethnic groups of the subcontinent. There are some people like Thoma believe that not only drawing lines as part of faith, but also respecting them with blood. The border created at the times of the partition leads to further brutality in the forms of those riots, pogroms, and organized historical distortion and cultural depletions, with which the history of Indian independence replicate. This is the end of my presentation, and my thanks goes all of you for your time and listening my presentations, and also my thanks goes to the organizing committee of today's international conference for giving me a chance to present my paper. Thank you, everybody, and thank you all.